Now, if you've spent any time on the internet over the past few years, chances are you've seen this image. A fairly simple picture of a large empty room with mustard yellow walls. Originally uploaded to 4chan by an anonymous user under a post asking, "What images make you feel off?" And it's definitely a strange photo, but I don't think anyone was prepared for the impact that this picture would go on to have. This single image is responsible for spawning the entire Backrooms lore. Every wacky monster, every strange location, every take and interpretation all started right here. So what is the Backrooms? Well, it's a place. The place that's supposedly shown in this photo. An unnatural offshoot of our own world, where things get real weird and real dangerous. It's essentially an alternate dimension that anyone can just fall into and become trapped in at any time. And like I said, this photo is just the beginning. The Backrooms has really gone on to have a life of its own. People have written stories about this place, made short films. There's even an entire wiki which documents everything that's currently known about the Backrooms. And ever since I saw this image, I needed to know, what is it that makes the Backrooms so alluring? Is it the unnatural layout of this place that defies all logic? The hallways which seemingly go nowhere? Or is it the monsters that call the Backrooms home sweet home? It's hard to say, but what I do know is they went and made a whole game out of this place, called Escape the Backrooms. Now, you don't have to just look at these images, you can jump right into them, explore every corner and discover its secrets for yourself. Now, there's actually quite a few games based on the Backrooms, but this one seems to be the most popular, and the best received. It's a survival horror experience, where we must navigate our way through this wacky world, and as the title suggests, escape the Backrooms. And this was interesting to me, because I never really got into survival horror. I was more of a DS kid growing up, and Nintendo seemed to be a bit more focused on virtual dogs and hot Italian plumbers. But I'm a big boy now, I own a computer, so I thought it was about time that I experienced some of that trauma my younger self couldn't have, and escape the Backrooms with its strange aesthetic and seemingly endless lore seemed right up my alley. And perhaps the one thing I do know about this game is that every level is pretty different from one another, introducing a new monster and a new location. It's like a whole bunch of minigames combined into one, which sounds ambitious, especially for an indie game. I mean, it's hard enough designing one cool location and one spooky monster. Imagine having to do it over and over again. So my curiosity was high, but so was my skepticism. I needed to know if a game could really pull this off. So I thought it would be fun to bring you folks along for the ride as I go through and rank every level of Escape the Backrooms. And maybe find the real Backrooms along the way. So grab your hazmat suits and let's dive on in. Level 0, the lobby.
This is the lobby.
When we first load into the game, it's like we've been planted directly into that original Backrooms image which started it all. But when you're staring at a photo, it's hard to comprehend just how easy it is to get lost in a place like this. Everything is identical, so within just a few seconds of wandering about, I was completely disorientated.
There are no rules, man, we're lost.
Because nothing stands out, there's no landmarks to take a mental note of. It really is an effective maze, not to mention how off-putting the lighting and colouring is. It kinda reminds me of when the walls have been stained yellow from countless years of smoking inside.
Alright, we are in a home where the previous owners smoked cigars for 50 years in this 900 square foot duplex. Look how yellow these walls are with nicotine, and it's crazy, they've never been cleaned.
But then on these stained walls is more stains, and it just feels like I can smell this place. PU. But enough of the location, what are we actually doing here? This is a game after all, what's our objective? Well, one of the first things we see, and one of the only unique things in this place, is a handwritten note on the wall, telling us what the exit looks like and what the enemy looks like. That's it, no waypoint or marker or mini-map, barely even a description of our goal. And this only adds to the feeling of isolation, because there's no human interaction. This objective could have been given to us through a voice or even just a pop-up from the game itself, but instead it's a simple note and we know nothing about the one who wrote it, only that they're not here. But as much as I love the use of these notes, this one is teasing us a little, because after a good amount of time spent exploring this level and retrieving what I needed to escape, it became clear that this creature shown on the note wouldn't be showing its face, at least not in this level, and I understand why they chose not to put this guy in. If you remember, this level isn't actually called level 1, it's called level 0, and so I assume the creators thought that the environment would be enough, and that a threat wasn't needed. But I would argue that once you realise there's no danger on this level, it takes away nearly all of the tension. And so I'm very conflicted, because what drew me to the Backrooms in the first place wasn't any monster, or as they're called here, entities. Yeah, I know, titties, get out your system now. It was the feeling of being lost, trapped somewhere that you shouldn't even be able to access, in between worlds, and this level does do an amazing job of capturing this. But then, on the other hand, it is a video game, and traditionally, video games have challenges. You need something to keep you on your toes, and this level doesn't have that. But I do think it's a good introduction to the concept visually, and one of the best locations in the game. The lobby is essentially the Backrooms on default, so I think it belongs in B tier. I mean, it's cutting close, but we'll go B. If it was anything other than the very first level, I'd put it lower, but we can use it as a nice little control going forward. Something to compare the other levels to. Level 1. It's time for the most terrifying location of them all, a car park, also known as a parking garage. But this isn't the kind of car park filled with people taking up 2 spaces or fighting each other for spots.
God, it is full. This car park is full.
Because this one is home to an entity. Now, the car park is sort of a reverse of the previous level, where the lobby had a great location with pretty average gameplay. The car park has pretty fun gameplay, but an average location. And the reason I say this is because it looks like somewhere where all of us have already been, and probably could go right now. The car park looks like it belongs in our world, but the lobby, I've never been here, and I couldn't even if I wanted to. It's such a unique environment, but a dark car park with spooky noises is still just a car park. Although it doesn't feel entirely out of place, it's still got no windows, so it's cut off from the outside world. Plus, car parks are already so easy to get lost in. And it's not completely ordinary in here. There's a moment later on which I think nails the feel of the Backrooms. We're still in the car park, but now the lights are off, except for the ones in our close proximity. So where we move, the lights follow. And it makes it feel like we're in a dream, as though the Backrooms itself is reacting to our movements and adjusting with every step we make, almost like it's alive. And if the whole of the car park had some otherworldly feel like this, I'd probably put it in one of the top tiers. But let's talk about the gameplay and meet the entity who inhabits this car park. And honestly, when I first saw this monster, I thought I was gonna have a heart attack. I'm not proud to admit this, but I'd probably spent an hour playing the game at this point, almost all of which was spent wandering through the lobby. And throughout this hour, not one sighting of an entity, not even a crumb, not even a spooky ghost. He's right behind me, isn't he? And then, out of nowhere, this big hulking boy came rushing towards me and gobbled me up all in under 5 seconds. He rushed me from behind. At this point, after the whole lobby situation, I wasn't even sure if there would be an entity on this level. And I'd almost completely forgotten about the note when you enter the car park that says, check everyone's IDs. Meaning, if you're playing as a team, you're in trouble. Because there's a reason that this monster is called the Skin Stealer. You see, he doesn't always look this spooky. He starts off as an imposter, dressed in a hazmat suit, indistinguishable from the players.
You've been seeming sus lately. It's almost like we have an imposter among us.
So the second time I encountered this guy, I actually ran up to him, thinking he was on my side. He was a friendly NPC who was gonna guide me on my way out of here. Maybe we'd share a few drinks and see what happens. But I was bamboozled when he ran up to me and ate me up. Again, before I even had a chance to react. Now, this imposter mechanic obviously works better when playing multiplayer, as it creates paranoia between you and your team. But I played this game solo, so I can't say for sure how effective it is, but I mean, it tricked me, so... Although, admittedly, in single player, this is only really gonna work the one time, as every time after I knew. Don't trust anyone. And now, whenever anyone asks who hurt me, I say Skin Stealer entity from the Backrooms car park.
We could have had a good life together. Fucking real good life. Had us a place of our own.
And he may have bested me 2 times, but I'll be damned if I let him get me a 3rd. What's that saying again?
If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
It turns out the actual best method of survival, and pretty much the main technique of this game going forward, is to run into a room and shut the door behind you.
Let me in. Let me in.
And it took me way too long to figure this out, I think because it is such a simple solution. I wasn't expecting it to be that easy. I could have saved a lot of time spent running in circles. But I'm actually not mad that it was such a simple solution. This is the first actual level after all, and I don't think a horror game needs to be Elden Ring level challenging. One of my favourite things about this game is that it only took me a couple of days to complete. But that being said, I do hope the danger continues to escalate going forward, because if every monster is thwarted by a simple door, it just makes them feel a bit less intimidating. This isn't the last time we'll see the Skin Stealer, but I do think this is the best use of him. He fits in really well with the grey aesthetic of the car park. We don't know he's an imposter at this point, so he catches us off guard. And he's responsible for my favourite visual of the game, when I made it into a room safely, only to turn around to see this entity walking away with the exaggerated swagger of a man saying, "Ah shit. Here we go again." Or this moment, where the game glitched and I was stuck in place, forced to stare at the Skin Stealer's stussy for the rest of time. Or until I restarted the game, which I may or may not have taken my sweet time doing. This level is just a solid piece of survival horror. Yeah, there are weirder, wackier entities we'll encounter later on, and weirder, wackier worlds, but I understand that you want to ease into that stuff. The car park is simple, but it's simple done well. It's a B tier. Level 1.5, Lights Out.
Turn out those lights!
Now, the reason I call this level 1.5 is because it's more of a segue between the first and second, rather than its own complete level. The goal is to make your way through a big open hall, but this hall is territory to the entities known as the Smilers, a collection of floating smiles who are allergic to light. So as long as you're lit up, you're safe. The problem is that the lights here turn off periodically, so you have to move in short bursts, getting the timing just right. But even if you do make it, it's hard to feel safe, because the Smilers watch from the shadows. Now, the Smilers are another entity that will be popping up frequently throughout the game, and this is one of their better uses, because the environment is tailored to their specific skills and weaknesses. This location only works because of the Smilers. It seems designed with them specifically in mind, whereas later on, there are times where they feel like more of an afterthought, an entity thrown in for the sake of it. So even though this is one of the smaller sections of the game, it does a great job of establishing one of the more interesting entities, even if its best use is still yet to come. So I'm thinking A tier. I really don't have many issues with this one. Get in there, Lights Out. Level 2, Pipe Dreams. You know, I'm pretty familiar with the pipe myself. Walking into Pipe Dreams, we're greeted with a decision we must all make at some point in our lives. One tunnel but two paths, blue pill or red pill, Pepsi Max or Coca-Cola, station or fun. And you know me, I love some fun. Now, there's a lot of subtle things about this tunnel which really add to the tension. As we travel down, every few meters on the right lies an indent on the wall, just deep enough to be cast in shadow from a distance. And it's very easy to mistake these indents as more tunnels and hallways. It kept my eyes glued to the right, ready for anything to jump out at any moment. It's a nice way of keeping you on your toes while doing something as simple as walking down a tunnel, and using something as simple as lighting. A free tool, but an invaluable one. And if you're making an indie game with a small team, being able to master lighting will take you so much further than a big budget. And lighting will continue to be this game's strong point going forward. Now, this tunnel seemed to go on forever, to the point where I began to wonder if the game was messing with me and I'd chosen the wrong path. But eventually, I reached what seemed like the end. No more lights, just a torch lying on the floor next to a black void. And as I stared into this void, debating whether to carry on or go back and try the other route, a small ball of light came rushing towards me from the darkness. And the second I realized what this was, I knew I either had to grab the flashlight next to me or retreat back the way I came, into the light, because this was a smiler. And boy, the tension here is great, as you scrabble to grab the flashlight, turning away from the incoming danger, only relying on its rapid footsteps and bizarre laugh to tell how close it's getting. And embarrassingly, I forgot the controls for crouching, so I wasn't able to grab the flashlight in time. And yeah, I died here, but for a brief second, I was able to make out something poking out of the darkness. What looked like a set of sharp legs, pitch black spider legs, which threw into question just how much I actually understood about this entity. I was sure they were just these floating smiles, but maybe they've had these horrible spider bodies this whole time. They've just been hidden by the darkness they call home. Or maybe this is a new variant of the smiler. Will we see more versions even more horrifying than this? But they give us very little, which I actually loved. We still don't know how big this guy actually is, or how many legs it has. Overall, this level is short but sweet, and I think shows many of this game's best elements working together. The lighting, the claustrophobia, as well as a bit of psychological trickery with the sign. The only thing that could have made this better is by making the aesthetic of the tunnel a bit more strange and otherworldly. You could still keep the lighting the same, just retexture this puppy. But it's still really solid, so I'm gonna be generous and go A tier for this one. Wow, the game is scoring pretty high so far, but unfortunately, things begin to dip a little from here. Level 3, the cellar.
Get that wine cellar feeling.
Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of the cellar. Probably my biggest pet peeve in games is when everything looks interactive, but almost none of it is. And this level really suffers from this. There's switches and fuse boxes and controls everywhere, but only a few are actually important in completing the level, and it's frustrating. These kind of levels almost always default to just running around, pressing F to interact, and hoping for the best. And yeah, maybe that's my problem, but there isn't really a smarter way to go about it. The mission is just go out into these halls and find the fuse boxes. And these fuse boxes we have to find are virtually indistinguishable from the others, so it didn't really feel like a skill issue. And even when you do finally find the fuse boxes and open them, all you have to do is flick a few switches. It's so anticlimactic. I don't know, I'm just not the biggest fan of turning on the power missions. I know that's a broad statement, because it feels like every single game has one, but that's kind of the point. They're so done to death that it's nearly impossible to have a fresh spin.
Got the voltage we need. Now we just gotta route it to the ground floor.
I've worked out a way for them to reroute the power from the auxiliary battery.
Reroute to what?
Now, one of the elements found in every level of this game is the insanity meter, which to a fricked up guy like myself is just a regular meter. And if this meter gets too low, we go insane. But luckily, the Backrooms is full of snacks, such as energy bars, or even a nice, refreshing almond water. They love almond water in the Backrooms, not almond milk, almond water.
No. Get the almond milk.
Which I'm assuming is similar to those water tanks filled with orange slices they have in waiting rooms, but with almonds floating about instead. Now, there's a good chance this is addressed somewhere in the lore, on one of the wikis or fan pages, but my personal theory is that when they were purchasing all the assets for this game, they accidentally left a model of a yellow can in the cart, and thought, well, we're getting our money's worth out of this bad boy.
But hey, that's just a theory.
But hey, I'm glad there is all this almond water, because our insanity meter drains very quickly in the cellar, which I really liked, because it turned this level into a sort of time trial. In fact, I found this to be one of the most challenging levels in the game. You're constantly on your toes, especially thanks to the entities here. Maybe the most horrifying yet, called the Hounds. Human-dog hybrids that take the worst part of both of our species and smushes them together into these abominations. They look like a human has been stretched to the proportions of a dog, but not even a healthy human, a corpse, because the skin is so pale it's almost see-through. But perhaps my favourite part of the Hounds is how when they grab you and writhe their head around on their strangely long necks, it almost looks like they're trying to rip their own head off. But like even the Hound itself knows it's an abomination. So how do we defeat these abominations? What could possibly defeat such demons? Well, torchlight. And I know this sounds very similar to the Smiler's weakness, but there is more technique involved here. Because we're the ones controlling the source of light rather than running away into it. But this torchlight only blinds them for a few seconds. Plus, because there's multiple Hounds, they'll try and surround you. And so even though the fuse boxes are very tedious, when you involve the Hounds, it does salvage the gameplay. Although, that being said, I wish we could have had a strong entity like this placed in a more Backrooms bizarre location, because the cellar is one of the more generic when it comes to its design. If you ran up to someone in the street, showed them a still from this level, and then screamed in their face, "What game is this from?" then after calling the police and calming down, I think they'd say, "I have no idea what game that's from," even if they knew what the Backrooms is. It's just your standard iron bars and brick walls and fuse boxes that we've seen so much of in so many games. So even though I really like the Hounds as this creepy, unsettling threat, there's just too much dragging this level down, and so I'm gonna have to put it in C tier. Level 4, The Office.
I too want to Pam.
That's right, even if you're stuck in the Backrooms, fighting for your life, fighting off insanity, with limited munch and limited almond water, your boss will still find a way to call you into work for a sweaty shift. But luckily, after one of my least favourite locations in the game, we're thrown into a pretty great setting for a Backrooms level. Offices are naturally very neutral and simplistic places, with a lot of grey, a lot of the same furniture bought in bulk. They already have that element of everything looking the same before you even tweak it for a game like this. It's a great starting point, and I think if you were going to tweak a grey corporate office like this to fit into the weirdness of the Backrooms, a good place to start would be removing all of the windows. Make this place feel self-contained, because being cut off from the outside world is a pretty important part of what makes the Backrooms unsettling. But no, this level keeps the windows and instead makes this section take place during a storm, where the rainfall is so heavy nothing outside is visible. So we're still not sure where we really are. The answers are right there, but just out of reach. But even though I think the storm element is a really creative way of keeping the isolation and mystery alive, there doesn't really seem to be anything supernatural or off about this place. It's the same issue as the car park. This does feel like it could be any old office that you could go to right now. So they have the first half down, the familiarity, but they don't twist it into something unsettling. And I think a potential fix to this problem would be keep the windows and the storm element, but have the level be completely silent, almost as if this storm is fake. Or go a step further and place in the sounds of birds chirping, people murmuring, children playing, all coming from outside to make it seem like it's a clear sunny morning, seeing one thing but hearing another. I think this would do a decent job of helping build up the otherworldly feel. Now, unfortunately, just like the lobby, there's no entity in this level, but I actually didn't mind this too much as there is still a challenge we have to overcome. You see, they trade out an entity, which we've seen quite a few of over the past few levels, for a simple set of cameras, implying we're being watched. A different kind of fear, but just as effective. So the goal is to sneak past these 4 cameras, which periodically scan the room and make it to a control room. But if you're spotted by even one of these cameras, then you have to do it all over again. And not only this, but you have to walk past the rudest little computer I've ever seen on your way back to the start.
You are an idiot. You are an idiot.
And despite being in tears, this is the kind of stuff I love. The feeling that someone's just messing with us, and it might not even be personal, we've just happened to stumble into one of their challenges. Because we never do get to see the one who's operating these cameras. No moment where their grand plan is revealed. I mean, it might not even be a person messing with us, but the Backrooms itself. Because it's not just the entities that feel dangerous in this game, but the locations too. And so I don't mind too much if there's no memorable entities, if the location itself feels like an entity. I guess the only downside is this level is a bit too easy. I think it could do with some more serious consequences for being spotted by the cameras.
It's nerf or nothing.
Or even adding a time trial element other than the insanity meter to really keep us on our toesies. So overall, I think this level is a cut above average because it is something quite different. So I'm feeling a B. Yeah, we will go B. Level 5, Hotel Hell.
Welcome to AG Double Hockey Sticks.
Now, this is the beefiest level yet. It's really one level split into 3 mini ones, each one taking place on a different floor of a hotel, starting with the lobby. Like a hotel lobby, not the Backrooms lobby, original lobby, a new lobby. Now, I gotta respect the opening of this level because most of the danger is implied. It's mainly set up for what's to come. Let me explain. In this hotel lobby can be found a dumbwaiter, with a note next to it saying if you feed them, they will reward you. But we don't know who them is referring to, and how do we know if this note can be trusted? We don't even know who wrote it. What if the thing that we're feeding in the basement is the one who wrote this note in the first place? It's doing a lot with a little, forcing the player to speculate rather than laying everything out to us. So what do we actually have to feed this beast below? Well, check an almond water on the dumbwaiter and nothing. These entities are picky eaters. They only want one thing. Big purple blocks of moth jelly. Yummy. But I'm not used to playing on PC, so I kept accidentally pressing the wrong button and eating the moth jelly myself. Maybe I was the monster all along. And now, I don't even know if I even have enough moth jelly left to complete the level. Damn these chunky, clumsy thingies of mine. But even though this setup is great, I do feel there's a bit of a missed opportunity here. Because we're sending food down below, we know there's some kind of creature in the basement. But when we do finally feed it enough moth jelly for it to give us what we need to escape, 3 sets of keys to the hotel elevator, I was kinda hoping that when we'd get in and press the button to go up to floor 2, instead the elevator would take us down to the basement. forcing us to go out and confront this monster we've been feeding, essentially making us the food, because this would imply that whoever left the note is pretty intelligent. Not only would they have convinced us to feed this creature the moth jelly it needs, but now we've given ourselves up to it with almost no struggle, walking right into its lair to provide it its second meal. No. Instead, the elevator takes us up to floor 2 just as expected, and it just felt like a bit of a waste of this early build-up. There is this moment later on in the level where we arrive in a sort of boiler room, which could be the basement, but by the time we arrive at this boiler room, the moment's passed. All of the build-up and tension behind this dumbwaiter has been lost, which is a shame. Also, fun fact, here in England, we call the ground floor floor 0, whereas in many other countries they say floor 1 is the ground floor, so yeah. But if we don't go down to the basement, then where do we go? What lies on floor 2? Well, this floor is where the danger goes from implied to real, as we see the return of the skin stealer and the hounds, who roam these hotel halls looking for, well, us. And I think the return of these entities show that these levels do work better when there's some kind of threat. There were times when I'd be sneaking around these halls and then all the way down the other end would be the skin stealer, but because of how dark it was and the angle, it would be impossible to tell if he was coming towards me or walking the other way. So I was just frozen in place, stuck in between fleeing or carrying on towards my goal. And probably my favourite thing about this section are the final moments before we escape, in which we put a code into a lock. A padlock, meaning we have to spin the numbers around until we get the correct sequence, which sounds easy enough, until you realise this door is out in the open, in the entity's territory. And we're fully leaning in, so there's no way of knowing how far away the entities are. It's not a super long process, maybe 30 seconds or so total, but it's still a very intense moment that utilises what we can't see rather than what we can, which is a smart move for an indie game where the visuals might not always be up to scratch. But we still have one section left, because this door leads to the boiler room, a much more grungy setting than what we've seen so far, where the entity is bugs. Bugs. Giant moths which love the heat. So your main tool during this section is a good old-fashioned thermometer, and when the temperature rises, danger is nearby. So to avoid waking these moths, you need to get low and sneak by. Now, I think a giant bug is a perfectly fine monster on its own, but in a Backrooms game, I want something a bit more strange. Even just a giant bug mixed with something else. But it's not even just their design that I think is lacking, but their weakness is just sneaking past them. And this is the same weakness as so many other entities in this game. It's not even like we have to wait for them to look the other way, because they're asleep. So nothing about the moths stands out to me, and I honestly think this part of the game could be cut, and it would probably be more enjoyable. I mean, it doesn't even really fit with the theme of a hotel. This could be attached onto any level, and it would make just as much sense as it does here. So we have one decent section, one pretty great section, and one pretty bad section. I think that averages out at decent, so I guess like a C? Yeah, we'll go C. Level 6. Fun, with an exclamation mark.
It's not about winning, it's about fun.
Fun with an exclamation mark sees us back in the same tunnel from earlier, but this time we can travel down the fun direction. We'll still be chased by the horrific Smiler Spider. But sprint hard enough and you should make it to the party just in time. And boy, what a party it is. The Backrooms sure do know how to celebrate. We got go-go juice, balloons, even red cups, which I'm assuming are for beer pong with the skin stealer. I'm sorry, you win. And I gotta say, I love the aesthetic of this place. Orange walls, industrial lighting, a kooky, crazy patterned carpet. It really does feel like the kind of play area you'd go to when you're a kid.
Have a birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese's, and you'll get to be the big cheese.
Poggers!
I just love when horror and nostalgia mix. This place should feel safe and fun, but it's the opposite. It's claustrophobic and lifeless. But I think the real star of this level are the entities. These big hunky fellas holding balloons, called the party goers. That's actually what they called me in school, because I went to so many parties. And if you make too much noise, these party goers will break their stance and come gobble you up. And I know this sounds pretty similar to the sleepy moths, but I think the reason that these partygoers work is because they contrast really well with their environment. They're all green and brown, they look like walking bogeymen, whereas everything else here is colourful and fun, so they feel like an infection on our nostalgia. And the way they bob along to the music, it's as though they're genuinely having a great time, and that's why they're attacking us. It might not be because we're food to these guys, but because by making noise, we're disrupting their music. And in doing so, disrupting their fun, with an exclamation mark. Speaking of the music, this is one of the only levels that actually has a soundtrack. And normally, while I think that the lack of music actually helps with the isolation, the fear of this level doesn't come from isolation, it comes from being constantly surrounded by these things. So the music never felt out of place here. Although it is quite funny how, in a level where the goal is to make as little noise as possible, to the point where standing up will set off these guys, cracking open a can of that sweet, sweet almond water, slurping it down, and then chucking it on the floor is perfectly fine. Yeah, I'm sure they won't hear that. You carry on slurping, big boy. Also, this is just speculation, but fun is where it really started to feel like the Backrooms is connected in some way to our own reality. The fact that the partygoers are holding balloons and don't want the fun to end implies this might have been a real party in our world that somehow got intertwined with the Backrooms, and these partygoers were once normal children. There's this constant feeling of corruption throughout the game, and the longer you stay here, the weirder things get. I mean, just look at the insanity meter. So there's a chance that who you are, or what you're doing when you enter the Backrooms, affects what kind of creature you'll end up becoming. And this is one of the best things about this level. It really feels like there's something bigger going on here, but it keeps it vague enough to allow the player to come to their own conclusion. Plus, the Backrooms is all about mystery, so the more concrete answers we're given about this place, the less scary and fascinating it becomes. And I think fun gives us just enough to go on. Overall, this level is exactly the kind of weird, surreal experience I wanted when playing a Backrooms game. What can I say? It's fun with an exclamation mark. S tier. Level 7, the Poolrooms.
Boom! Pool!
Honestly, the Poolrooms are kinda beautiful. Probably the only Backrooms location I could see myself settling down in. Just look at the dust particles in the air shining about, the pristine tiles, the tasteful thickness of the water. And if I were you, I'd pack a jacket, because all these whites and blues just make this place feel so cold. But what I'm looking for more than any other element is whether these levels can strike that balance of familiar and bizarre. And this level knocks it out the park. Because these kind of pools with knee-height water are something we've all been around and nearly drowned in while our mum's outside smoking a Sterling Red. But the actual structure of the Backrooms defies all logic. In real life, pools are wide and open for safety reasons. The lifeguard has to be able to spot you when you're drowning because your dad's outside with your mum smoking a Sterling Blue. But instead of open, the pool rooms are segmented into small squares, just a few meters wide. And all of these squares are identical, making it so easy to get lost. It's as though the pool rooms are designed to obscure your vision, not enhance it. It all makes no sense, and so this place doesn't feel like it was made by a person. But despite being nonsensical, this layout isn't random. There's clearly thought put into it by the game creators. By this point, we know what kind of game this is. Chances are there's an entity lurking in these waters. But because there's walls everywhere obscuring our vision, it keeps us ready for one to jump out at any moment. And if one does, we're in knee-height water. If you've ever tried wading through water like this, you'll know how much of a struggle it is. But unfortunately, this isn't accounted for in the physics of the game. We move at normal speed. And not only that, but just like the lobby, there is no entity in the pool rooms. Supposedly, their plan is to update the game as they make it, so there could be plans for an entity to be added here. But from what I can tell, this was one of the first levels added, and there's been quite a few updates since then. So if there's no entity in this level by now, then I don't know if there ever will be. And it's such a shame, because this is an iconic Backrooms location. You could do so many interesting things with an entity here. I don't know, for example, you're wandering around and then all of a sudden you hear something wet moving about. Something is approaching, but when you look around, there's nothing in the water. How strange. But you're looking in the wrong place. Instead of an entity approaching from where you'd expect, it's coming from above, hanging from the tall ceiling, just out of your field of view. I think that would be a nice, unexpected scare, and any entity is better than no entity. Atmosphere and a cool location can only get you so far. At the end of the day, this is a game, and games require challenges. So even though the natural fear of this place is really good, I think I'm gonna have to set a rule going forward that any level without a threat or some kind of mission is gonna be capped at C tier. Because again, you want the game to progress, you want it to escalate, and this feels a bit like it's regressing. We didn't need a second lobby in my opinion, so sorry pool rooms, C it is. Level 8. Run. You're never gonna guess what we do in this level. It's essentially Backrooms meets Temple Run. We're thrown right into a dash through a hospital hallway, as objects fall out in front of us, blocking our path, all whilst being chased down by the balloon bopping boys and the stompy smiler. And what I think in any other game, objects falling out in front of us could feel random. Here, it actually makes it feel like the Backrooms is alive, and working with those chasing us to try and trap us in. Although it would have been nice if occasionally they switched up the routine, because as it is, it's the same sequence every time, so it's essentially just a memory game which you learn very quickly, and it gets old very quickly too. I mean, there's not really all that much to this level. It's hard to mess up what's essentially just a 100-meter dash. What can I say? It's a fast but fairly forgettable level. C tier. Level 9. The end.
We're in the end game now.
Ah, the end. We finally reached the final level. Or so it seems, because this title is a bit of tomfoolery. This is far from the last level, but the question is, if it was, would it be a decent note to end on? Well, in some ways, this gave me what I wanted from Escape the Backrooms. A fairly challenging level with an interesting entity set in the classic Backrooms aesthetic. But there are still a few things holding it back. So level 9 seems like some kind of library, but all of the books are missing. I guess someone got hungry for knowledge. And it's not just the title that's trying to trick us into believing we're finally going to escape the Backrooms, but also the sheer amount of almond water cans and torches lying all over the place, making me think, why do we need all this? What kind of threat are we facing here to where we need this many resources? You see, every time we die, our inventory is wiped clean, so a lot of food and equipment is a pretty good sign that the game thinks you're going to be dying a fair few times here. But who runs this library? Well, let's meet the Scratcher. And I think this entity and this location are a pretty good example of why making a good Backrooms game is such a challenge. So the design of the Scratcher is pretty great. It's the tallest entity yet, standing at a couple meters tall, with long skeletal limbs and the grey skin of a corpse. It's very unsettling. But remember, this environment is quite bright, at least when compared to most horror games, especially independent ones with smaller budgets, because making your environment darker can be the biggest difference in hiding a digital character's imperfections. This is why so many big CGI battles in movies take place at night. If it's harder to see, it's harder to see flaws. But a pretty big part of the Backrooms as a concept is that it isn't like most other horror locations. It is often bright, it is often colourful, so when the entities have janky movements, you can see them clear as day. And this is probably the same reason why they didn't put entities in the opening level or the pool rooms. These are two of the most classic Backrooms locations, but they're also two of the brightest. And the library and the Scratcher only really prove this theory further, because it doesn't hold up very well under the bright lights. It's doing that thing where a character's walk cycle doesn't match up with the distance they're moving, and it never really interacts with the environment. There's no moment where it bumps into or knocks over one of these bookshelves or leans over one of them to try and find us, which is fine. Again, it's an indie game, and these things are far easier to say than to program. The entities don't have to interact with the environment, but they should at least look like they belong in the environment. And this is why the floaty smilers always work. This entity could exist in any level because it's so simple. It doesn't have any complex movements. It's essentially a floating PNG. But hey, it works. So the Scratcher either needs to be simplified, made less janky in a future update, or placed in a darker location. And I think this is proven in the very same level, because after 90 seconds in the library, the lights go out. And the Scratcher immediately becomes more terrifying, because its scariest feature isn't its appearance, it's the noise it makes.
This is a douchebag who goes around shushing people that he doesn't even know.
Yeah, people who could have chainsaws.
And this shushing isn't just creepy, it's more evidence that the entities in the Backrooms were once real people. Kids at a birthday party, dogs yapping away, a sexy, sexy librarian. So yeah, a disappointing level when the lights are on, and a pretty strong one when the lights are off. So I'm thinking a standard C for the end. But I do respect them for at least putting an entity in here, so it's a high C, but a C nonetheless. Level 10, the town and the clown.
Like Bozo the Clown?
Now, this level takes everything I've previously been praising about this game and flips it on its head, and yet still manages to be one of the most memorable and well-executed sections. While in every other level up until this point, the outside world and any kind of nature has been kept from us, making the Backrooms feel as artificial as possible. We now find ourselves out in the open. Instead of low ceilings and industrial lighting, it's blue skies and rolling hills as far as the eye can see. So you'd think that now we're free from all of this claustrophobia, a sense of safety would settle in. But it's a trick. Something's off about this place. It's close to normal, there are houses, but they all sit awkwardly on top of these hills, and there's no paths or driveways up to them. It's as though they've been planted randomly around with no logic or reason. And once inside, things are no more normal. All of the furniture is identical from house to house. There's nothing unique or personal about any of these. They seem more like show homes or dolls' houses than somewhere where people actually live. Yes, we're finally outside, but that artificial feeling hasn't been lost. Plus, all of these empty homes bring up an unsettling question. Where is everyone? It's almost more lonely out here, because walking into a town, you expect to see people, some signs of life, but nothing, just silence. When we spawn in, there's a note telling us about curfew. We must be inside by nightfall, as the entities of this level, the local youth, only come out to hunt at night. But this shouldn't be a problem, right? It's bright as hell outside. We've got plenty of time. In fact, I'm gonna have a little nap. But you see, this level takes full advantage of the fact that it's the first time we're seeing the sky and the outside world, because time works a little bit differently out here. The day-night cycle is so rapid, a whole day goes by in just a couple of minutes. And honestly, the sunrise-sunset animation looks really great. If I wasn't being chased down by murderous children, I'd happily sit and enjoy it for a while. And even though this sunset cycle seems like just another way for the creators to avoid showing an entity under clear lighting, it is one of the more creative ways they go about this. If you're gonna turn off the lights, this is how you do it. And you'd think that now we're out in the open, instead of tight hallways where our vision's obscured, it'd be pretty difficult to get lost, but that's not the case. A maze can be just as difficult to navigate as a desert, because everything still looks the same. The houses, the hills, the road. The only outlier is a floating castle in the sky off in the distance that acts like a beacon, a waypoint to travel towards. This floating castle takes a few day-night cycles to reach, which is fine when there's houses to escape into. But right at the end of this journey, we have this big open stretch with nowhere to hide. So you have to time this journey carefully if you want to make it, or you'll be left fumbling around in the dark while the young'uns come down on you. I only made it by a few seconds max. Oh, I'm dead. Oh, wait. Yay! It's tense stuff, and I love how this level brings that otherworldliness into the gameplay itself. The world, the sky is our enemy here. This level is fantastic, and I'm putting it in S tier. But if you have the best memory on the planet, or you're a super genius, you might remember I call this level the town and the clown. So where's the clown? Where's the and the clown? Well, this is actually a 2-for-1er. This castle in the sky turns out to be a colourful fun house, full of paintings of creepy clowns. And I gotta say, I much prefer the look of the first half of this level. It's unexpected and captures a tone which is hard to pin down. But a clown funhouse is one of the first things I'd jot down when making a spooky places list. And of course, this is for good reason. Clowns and funhouses are naturally very creepy, but that doesn't mean that every horror game has to have them. It just would have been nice to see them stick with the town theme right up until the end of this level, but that doesn't mean that there isn't good stuff to be found here. After solving a puzzle in the opening room, a figure can be seen waiting for us. A clown, waving right at us. What a friendly guy. But because he's far away and standing dead still, it's hard to tell if he's actually real or a statue. And just as I cautiously stepped through the door, waiting for any movement from this clown fella, I heard what sounded like the door shutting behind me. But to be certain, I had to turn around, taking my eyes off the clown. And when you look back, he'll be gone. It's a very effective opening, but it's downhill from here. The goal is to survive for 2 minutes while the clown hunts you down. But if you look at him, he'll stop coming towards you, spawn somewhere else, and try again. And I think that's a pretty big weakness to have. It seems like it's supposed to be a boss, but it's basically just the hounds and the smiler, but even weaker, because A, there's only one, and B, we can just stand in the same area and frantically look about. We don't have to even go anywhere. You could easily cut this level out and it wouldn't be missed. So I know it's kind of cheating, but I think I'm gonna split this one into 2 levels, with the town going in S tier and the clown going in E, because it really does feel like 2 levels, plus we need some more variation on this tier list. I mean, look at it. Also, this is probably a good time to mention that what I've been calling these levels aren't the actual titles. I wrote this video a pretty long time ago, and whether these titles were supposed to act as placeholders or I genuinely thought this is what they were called, we'll never know. But the real levels can get really hard to keep track of. I'm pretty sure this one is called level 94. I think there's genuinely one which is called level 4567892 Z. So we're gonna stick with the nicknames, the next one being level 11, Radar. Beep boop. Now, I'll admit, Radar isn't the most backroomsy level, but I understand that with this many levels, not everyone can be. And out of all the levels that aren't a bizarre location, this one is the most interesting to me, because the location is a mystery, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So we spawn into a rusty basement cave looking place, just grey and dinge and grey, and a sprinkle of darkness too, with the goal being to navigate through a small series of hallways using our torch to guide the way. And at first I thought, okay, this one's looking like it's going to be one of the more forgettable levels, but I'll try not to judge it just yet. It's still early days. And boy am I glad I didn't, because what happens next is yet another great example of using lighting to build atmosphere. After about a minute or so of navigating these tunnels, you reach a section where the lights are flickering due to radiation. And not only that, but our most valuable tool, our torch, is out of action. All we have is this yellow gun-looking thing with a radar attached. Wait a second, that's the name of the level. But instead of shooting bullets or nerf or nothing, it shoots small dots of light which stick to the wall. And these tiny dots are the only thing guiding your way, meaning you can only slightly make out the walls and doorways, so we never actually get to see the location we're in. It wouldn't surprise me if they just didn't texture these walls, because, well, what's the point? And these dots you fire actually help improve the gameplay, because instead of just wandering aimlessly about the maze, you can use these dots to your advantage. You see, every time you re-equip the gun, the colour of the dots you fire changes. So if you remember to change the colour every minute or so, you can tell not only where you've already been, but when you were there. So you can figure out if you're going back on yourself, and this is never explained to us, it's just something you have to figure out. So we know what the gun does, but what about the radar? Well, as usual, there's an entity lurking in this maze, but all we get is a small dot on the radar when it's nearby. Or a subtle silhouette against the bright dots. But it's really easy to lose this guy in them, unless you got that trigger finger. All of this requires very little in terms of assets and programming, and I think that's what an indie game should be aiming for, using the basics to their full advantage. Lighting, sound design, layout. You know, it doesn't matter how detailed the entity on this level is, because most of the time we don't even see it, but it's still every bit as effective when you hear it breathing and see that tiny red dot getting closer. This level actually reminded me a lot of Iron Lung, that one Markiplier movie from a couple years in the future, where you have to navigate an ocean of blood in a rusty submarine. And what makes the game special is that the fear doesn't come from what you can see, it comes from what's being hidden from you. But while Iron Lung sticks with this technique right up until the very end, only showing us what the creature stalking us looks like at the very last moment. Here in the radar level, we don't have to wait long to see this creature up close and personal. And I kinda wish they held off on showing them until later on. I think that would have made this level linger for a bit longer in my mind. Maybe give it a really unique sound effect, so that later on, long after we've escaped this level, they can play this sound effect and we can start to speculate if this entity has followed us all the way through the backrooms. Maybe they know some shortcuts and they're not happy we passed through their territory. You could still have it kill us in this level, maybe just don't show us what it looks like when it does. But But even though they didn't commit to keeping it hidden, this is still a really unique and memorable level, and a good example of clever, low-budget game development. So I'm thinking A tier for the radar. This section of the game is really experimental, and I'm loving it. Level 13, the ocean one.
Big, big water.
Thalassophobia is the fear of deep bodies of water, which out of all the phobias, I'd say skews on the more rational side. We begin this level by travelling down a set of stairs to a flooded room, and looking out of this room, we see a collection of houses, sitting in the ocean with water up to their first floor. Or second floor. We've already been over this. So what's going on here? This doesn't look like a flood. There's no trees or pylons or any sort of debris. Just houses. So are they floating? Are they just really tall? Or is the water not as deep as it seems? Once again, it seems like the Backrooms is warping reality and physics, which sounds like a complaint, but it's really not. I love it when the game does this, but only when it feels intentional, like it does here. In fact, this level might have some of the most effective examples of warping physics in the entire game. If you look back at this initial house where we enter this level, from a distance, there is no physical way that the previous level could connect to this one. Remember, we came down into this level, but where we came from, the radar tunnels, are nowhere to be seen. Logically, they should be floating above in the sky, but nothing. I mean, we sort of already knew that these places probably aren't actually physically connected to one another due to each level being so different in terms of their location and appearance. But this is the first time that we actually get proof of this with our own eyes. It really makes it feel like we're jumping between dimensions, and these doorways between levels are the connections. But unfortunately, all of these interesting questions which this environment brings up aren't enough to salvage the gameplay. The goal here is to make our way across this sea through some houses to a lonely lighthouse, using nothing but a small wooden boat. That's right, we're seafaring pirates now.
I'm gonna be king of the pirates!
But if being a pirate is as fun as this level, then I don't want to be king of the pirates, because boy, this section is a drag. It's just rowing towards the same light source for a couple minutes with no obstacles. We're like moths to a flame here. You can really switch your mind off, which I don't think is a good thing for a game. This isn't daytime TV, I want to be engaged. So I was already disappointed, but then things got even worse. After arriving at the lighthouse, we have to get into a diving cage, which will take us all the way to the sea floor. Which, thanks to a note seen earlier, we know is home to a fish-like entity. The only thing is that, yeah, I never ran into this guy, and according to the wiki, it hasn't been properly added yet. Apparently, it is actually here though. It's what causes the diving cage to plummet so quickly when it comes and cuts the line. But I didn't even see this happen. It's communicated very poorly, and it seems more like the line just fails. But even if this is the case, and I did see the thing, the big threat of this level is confined to what's essentially a cutscene. If we're not gonna see this creature, fine, but then just take out the note until it's been added, because now I'm double disappointed. Now, I try to avoid putting my own ideas into games too much. I can sit here and say, well, I would have done it this way, all I like, but I'm not a game developer. I don't know how hard it is to achieve what I'm proposing. But I think in this case, where you have a level which promises a monster, but doesn't have one, it's a bit more justified, because if you don't put one in, then it's only natural I'll speculate about what I would like to see if there was one. As we know, almost all of the entities are fairly similar to humans when it comes to their size, and this works well for the claustrophobic environments because you want something that can navigate these tight hallways with ease. So for a level like this, which takes place out in the open ocean, this bottomless pit we're floating on, why not take advantage of the fact that a creature of any size could be lurking beneath us? So as we're navigating this ocean, something pops out of the water far off in the distance, before quickly suddenly disappearing. And this doesn't even have to be in the direction we're heading. Maybe just something you'll only notice if you happen to be looking at this direction at this specific moment. Then, as you travel further, you notice a second lighthouse appear through the thick fog. Much smaller and out of the way, just a little bit of a detour. For some players, the curiosity will kick in and you'll have to know, what is this other light? I'm gonna travel towards it. And as you do this, the keen-eye players will notice that the water around the boat is getting darker, very gradually. But when we get closer, it turns out it's not a lighthouse, it's a buoy. Like a sea boy, not a boy, human boy, bobbing along with a note attached. Naturally, our curiosity will kick in and we'll leave the boat, stepping onto the buoy to read the note. After all, every other note has had valuable information given to us by a helping hand. But when you read this note, all it says is wrong path, written in different handwriting to every other note that's come before. Much more unhinged, as though whoever wrote it only just learnt how to write, trying their best to imitate the others. And at this moment, a huge set of teeth emerge from the water, completely surrounding us. Something has come to swallow us whole. And the only way to survive is to navigate around these teeth before they rise so high they're blocking the way out. Now, this is still very flawed, the main drawback being that this trickery will only really work the first time, as now you know, no detours. But I think having the notes themselves be a kind of villain would be a really nice switch up. Plus, the actual challenge part would be navigating your way out of the teeth, so there is some replayability. Also, admittedly, a more backroomsy entity would be nice rather than a big sea monster, but you're only really seeing its teeth anyway, so I don't know. This is probably a bit ambitious, and whatever they come up with I'm sure will be a lot better than this, so hopefully it's not too long till it's added, because I am genuinely curious. As for the actual ranking, like I said earlier, if a level doesn't have a threat or an engaging challenge, then it's capped at a C. But I think this is actually worse than that, because it actively promises an entity with the note. So I'm going E with this one. Level 14, Cave System.
I'm currently descending hundreds of feet into a cave.
I'm not even going to sugarcoat this, I really did not like this level. It's essentially the exact same as the boiler room mission from the hotel level earlier on, but without the thermometer element. So not only does this level bring nothing new to the table by reusing the moth and the skin stealer entities, but it actually feels like the game is regressing here, and the environment is so dull, just a regular old cave. I just think if the location isn't going to be all that interesting, at least throw a new monster in there. So we have my least favourite entity, my least favourite location, it doesn't offer up anything new, and in my opinion, the cave system is the worst Escape the Backrooms level. E tier. Level 15, the Corrupted Lobby, aka the Stinky Backrooms. PU.
Uh-oh. Stinky.
Ooh, now we're talking. A level with the classic Backrooms aesthetic, which actually has an entity and isn't a single room like the library. I'm in. But if you thought the original aesthetic looks a bit mouldy, then this place takes it to a whole nother level. It's almost identical to the lobby, except the whole place is rotting away. There's even these rooms full of rubbish bags which have something in them. Uh-oh, my insanity meter's getting a bit low. Well, 5-second rule. And this staining only furthers the idea that the Backrooms is a sort of infection, and this decay is only going to get worse the longer we stay here. And it's because the lobby looks the way it does that this feels impactful. If this is what it looks like after just a few hours in the Backrooms, then what will happen if we stay here for, say, a week? Will the same corruption happen to us? And even though I do prefer the original brighter aesthetic, because it's something we don't get a lot of in horror, I do think this level manages to maintain some of the feel of the lobby, even though it is darker and more gloomy. It's still got the bizarre layout, the industrial lighting, the emptiness. It still has that mix of bizarre and familiarity. I mean, it's not perfect, but it does the job. But let's talk weaponry quick. At this point in the game, we've acquired a chainsaw, and I was interested to see what would happen if we came up against an entity whilst wielding something that can do a lot of damage. Is there any way of fighting back physically? And just as I was thinking this, I turned a corner and there it was. The entity seen on the note from the lobby, pretty much the first thing we see when we open up the game. And even though I was a little disappointed, this chainsaw is completely useless against this guy. I am glad they actually included this thing, because I think it has one of the most interesting designs for an entity. Its limbs are so thin that it doesn't even look like it should be able to hold itself up. Plus, it's essentially a black scribble, so it's able to blend really well into the more shadowy areas, which actually makes the darker lobby aesthetic feel more appropriate. Not to mention the way it walks, it seems to be limping, as though it's in pain. If this place really did once look like the normal Backrooms, then maybe this entity is also a victim to this corruption. And yeah, this is just speculation, but speculation is fun, and I enjoy levels that encourage it. Plus, this entity's inclusion makes that original note we stumble across feel more like foreshadowing than a complete waste, salvaging the lobby, even if only slightly. Although, unfortunately, aside from its appearance, this entity is pretty much a direct copy of the Skin Stealer. But even the Skin Stealer has the imposter mechanic, so you could argue it's actually better in terms of gameplay, especially in multiplayer. Also, this level was over very quickly. It was barely a challenge. I think I only died the one time. Also, there are so many food items and go-go juices scattered about that staying sane and making an escape was never really an issue. I think out of all the levels where you'd want to have limited resources and a fast draining insanity meter, this level, which screams corruption, would be the one. You know, make the environment feel as toxic as possible. And by this point in the game, we know the rules. We're more skilled. And so I just can't help but wish that this and the first level were combined. Take the scribble from here and place it in the lobby, where it would actually take us off guard and be a reasonable threat. If I was ranking it as just this level, removed from the rest of the game, it would probably be higher, but I think you do have to take into account where in the game a level is placed, because we do expect different things from earlier and later levels. So yeah, I actually walked away from the Stinky Backrooms pretty disappointed. I'm gonna go D, a high D, but a D nonetheless. Level 16, the Suburbs. Boy, would I give anything to spend Halloween night in this little town, with the full moon, the fog rolling in, disrupting our vision. When I think of trick-or-treating, this is the location I picture in my mind. I think there's just something about these kind of suburbs at night. While the city never sleeps, the suburbs definitely do. Even where I'm from, a pretty small town, which granted looks very different from this. If you go for a walk past, say 10 PM, you won't see a single person, and they don't keep the streetlights on because there's not enough people walking around to justify it. It's all just a bit too quiet, so a Suburbs is actually pretty fitting for a game like this. I mean, it's kind of just the town from The Town and the Clown again, but I do think this level does enough to make itself stand out. When we first arrive in the burbs, there's a note introducing us to a powerful new technology. Finally, something which might be able to vanquish these entities for good. The ability to lock a door.
Cast it into the fire! Destroy it!
And to be honest, I don't really know why this wasn't added sooner, because this is pretty much the first level in the game where entities actually can open doors. So essentially, this level introduces a new problem, but then immediately tells us the fix for it, which wouldn't be a problem if the fix wasn't so easy. Locking the doors isn't exactly the hardest thing in the world. So again, the danger is barely escalated. I think it would have been more effective if every level up until this one did have this lock mechanic, which we have to use to stay safe. And now we're approaching the later stages of the game, this safety net is taken away from us. No more locks to hide behind. I mean, most of the rooms on this level have multiple exits and entrances anyway, so it's not like you're finished if an entity does spot you. Just leave a different way than they came in. Speaking of entities, I do actually like what we're given here, because we have not one, not three, but two entities. And it's the way they work together to make you feel trapped that I find interesting. The first entity is a massive eye on 4 legs that stomps around these streets looking for prey. It's like a patrol car doing the same route through the neighborhood, so it's less of a presence, but you do still need to watch out for it. The first time I heard it coming, my instinct was to run and hide inside one of these houses. Problem is, most of the houses on this level are locked. So I ran from home to home, hoping that one of them would provide shelter from this pervy boy. You see, this eye entity is really a driving force to try and trick you into running headfirst into one of these homes. Because with it hot on your tail, when you finally do find a house that you can enter, you might forget to stop and think for a moment. This is just a random house in the Backrooms. How do we know there's not an entity waiting for us inside? And then you hear it. But you have to choose, out here with the eye or in the unknown of this home. And I decided to take my luck inside. Decided being the important word here, because on this level it actually feels like you're making your own decisions. If I chose to stay outside, I would have eventually ran into a map of this town which tells us we need to enter these homes and reconnect them anyway. But I didn't know this, so to me, for a good portion of this level, there was a lot of discovery and decision making. All of which would have been lost had they just told me this information from the beginning of this level when we spawn in. So, now inside one of these homes, let's meet the residents, the evil residents. It turns out, these are actually the same entity we came across in the radar tunnels. Scarred, fleshy, humanoid figures armed with crowbars who don't take kindly to intruders. And I actually think these guys fit the suburb location way more than the radar tunnels. Back there, because we barely see the guy, you could really use any of the entities and it would have the same effect. But here in the suburbs, these guys never leave the boundary of their home, making them seem like proud homeowners who are just protective of their property. Because technically, we are invading on their territory. I even took a poopy in one of their toilets.
Hey, you! Get off of my property! Now!
And I love how they're completely silent. They don't seem erratic or crazy like most entities, just taking care of business. So yeah, the suburbs are pretty good. It's not the weirdest location or the most mind-bending entity, but it does a great job of building dread and keeping you on edge at all times. So I'm gonna rate my stay in the suburbs as a nice and cozy B tier. Level 17, Facility. A testing facility, in fact.
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
Now, this isn't technically a level, it's actually a level within the suburbs, but I'm counting it as its own thing because it does take a while. And this is probably where we get the most lore and some clues that can help us piece together one of the game's bigger mysteries: the origin of the entities. Now, unlike most levels, which greet us with a note, here we're given an informative video, which feels like it's from a different time.
In the event of an accidental contamination, instruct the affected person to stand in the middle of the emergency platform on top of the footprints. The platform should automatically close to ensure everyone's safety.
Which got me thinking, when is this game actually set? I mean, all of the tech is pretty old-fashioned and there's really nothing to tie it to the modern day. It's all flashlights and radios and Polaroid cameras. And on top of this, we really don't know when this video was recorded. It could have been just a week ago, or it could have been 30 years. That's the benefit of keeping us from the outside world. If it's been a week, then there's a chance this place is still being observed. Help may be on the way. But if it's been 30 years and this place remains untouched, chances are we're on our own. But the real reason this informative video stood out to me so much is because it contains one of the only voices we hear in the entire game. One of the few crumbs of humanity we come across. But it's still just a pre-recorded message, like the pre-written notes, giving us hope that maybe at some point we'll come across these helping hands. After all, there's strength in numbers, and the further into the game we get, the worse the isolation feels. Find someone else, a friendly NPC, and that isolation disappears. But the rational conclusion is that they've either made it out, or more likely, they're dead. But what are they actually testing in this facility? Well, it looks like someone's been experimenting on these entities, turning them into humans. Or a more likely possibility is that experimenting on humans is what created the entities in the first place. At least the ones found here anyway, because the goal of this level is to lure one of the humanoid entities, the same ones with the crowbars from the Suburbs, into a trap where, when sprayed with a fluid, will return them to their human form. So it looks like our prayers have been answered. Finally, a human NPC who we can team up with, who can give us some answers about this place, and maybe hold hands while skinny dipping in the pool rooms. But this NPC says nothing. We can't interact with them, and we can't even see their face underneath the hazmat suit. They seem traumatized by their time spent as an entity. After all, if there was anyone else in this facility, chances are this person ate their friends. So they just sit there, out of it, and we can do nothing to help. Almost as quickly as we're introduced to a piece of humanity, it's torn away from us. And so story-wise, this level is an A for me. But again, this is a game, so I gotta talk about the gameplay. And I gotta be honest, at this point I was sort of waiting for the game to either start wrapping up, or start shaking up the gameplay. Because this is the third sneak past the entity mission in a row, involving the same entity we've seen 3 times now. I like the idea of luring one into a trap, but they have to throw in all these tubes of, I can't even remember, some kind of gas or fuel to power up the trap, and it just felt like dragging out the playtime for the sake of it. There's no need to make this level longer when it's already a go and collect items mission inside of a go and collect items mission. Just way too much collection going on here, so it's another C. Level 18, Farm. After leaving the facility and making our way out of the suburbs, we find ourselves in the old country, having to navigate our way through a huge cornfield masked in a thick layer of fog. And we do this by heading towards red markers attached to windmills. Now, if you've watched my creepypasta ranking video where I briefly touched on this game, you'll know that I really didn't like this level. I didn't like it when I first played this game, and I like it even less now. It combines all of my least favorite features from the other levels into one stinky boy. It's got the wandering aimlessly towards light sources element like Thallasallamallaphobias. It's got the generic horror movie location with no otherworldly feel like the clown funhouse. And the entity is just a guy with a chainsaw who chases you down. it's just the skin stealer again. So not only does it bring nothing new to the table, but the stuff it does bring is really lackluster. It's such a drastic shift in tone and feels more like a homage to classic horror than something unique and bizarre. And I understand this farm is included in the lore, but that doesn't really absolve it for me. At the end of the day, I'm gonna judge it on how this game uses it. I mean, in the Backrooms lore, somewhere out there could be a giant poop monster who chases you down. And just because it's established in the lore doesn't mean it's automatically good or interesting. Although I would like that level included in the next update. This level just screams of throwing one in for the sake of it, which brings me to what I think is this game's biggest flaw. There's a lot of levels, I mean, you know, you've seen them, and I just wish that instead of all these decent levels with some great ones sprinkled in there, they just focused on making these decent levels great too. I know it's not that simple, and I understand wanting to make your game while it's coming out so you can implement feedback, but each update seems to be more focused on introducing new levels rather than perfecting the old ones. And I mean, it makes sense from a business perspective. If you're someone who's already played this game, you're way more likely to come back for a new level rather than a slightly better version of a level you've already played. The Backrooms was, and still kind of is, a pretty massive internet sensation, and like most sensations, chances are, over time, its popularity will go down. It happens to everything. So I can only guess, but I'd say the majority of people who would be interested in a Backrooms game will have already played this by now. What I'm saying is, most people will probably have gotten the first version, then a bit less will have gotten the first update, then a bit less again will have gotten the next update. So at what point does it stop becoming a pre-release and become a prolonged release? That will only be a complete experience for the last 10% of people who pick it up when it's at its 10th update. And I know there's only so much a small developer can do, and I know I've said this a lot, but it's because I want to make it clear. For an indie game, it's really impressive what they've done here, especially the environments, and I do recommend this game. There's definitely more good than bad. I just hope that one day we get a version of Escape the Backrooms that feels truly complete. And I think in order to do that, they need to focus on quality, not quantity, because otherwise you end up with levels like this, which I'm putting in E tier. Level 19, no clipping.
You want me to watch your clips? Watch my clips.
I feel like I've messed up the count. Has there been 19? Okay, well anyway, we're around 19, and it's time to grab your quarters and your shillings because we're heading to the arcade. But this is actually a bit of the old bait and switch. When we first enter, it's actually a nice clean lobby. I mean, I'd certainly bring a fine lady here to parlay, but then as soon as you enter the back of the arcade, the backrooms if you will, just like the lobby, the decay has seeped in. We're talking peeling walls and a nasty carpet. There's just something naturally upsetting about seeing a place which once brought so much fun and joy fall victim to time like this. This level actually reminded me a lot of Fun, with its balance of nostalgia and creepy. And even though it's not as striking, it's definitely a step in the right direction. Ah, nice, they got a foosball table in here. On second thought, I don't think I will be escaping the Backrooms this fine evening. I have a score to settle. I'm sorry, you win. But unfortunately, the arcade is really just a segue to what this level's really about. And to be honest, I wish they scrapped the chase sequence in the cornfield, and instead we were being chased around this arcade, because it's a much more visually interesting location. I mean, it definitely took longer to design. Sorry to keep going on about it, but with the cornfield, you can just copy and paste the same asset over and over. But here, there is some variation in the arcade machines and the different patterns patterns found in different areas, and it's a shame we leave this place as quickly as we enter. It just makes the whole segue feel a little bit pointless. I mean, I'd stay and complain, but we gotta move on to what this level's really about, which, if you hadn't guessed from the title, is the spooky process known as no clipping. On this level, if you're not watching where you're going, you'll fall down into a more dangerous floor. Now, I can forgive the whole arcade situation because I really enjoyed this section. With the corrupted lobby earlier on, even though we finally got a level set in the original Backrooms aesthetic, it was a bit simple and short. Well, this is the kind of challenge I wanted from that level. It gets really mind-bending. Even just the idea of no clipping itself. Is this another floor that we're falling into? Or could it be another alternate dimension? I mean, we've already seen that doorways in the Backrooms don't abide by the rules of physical space as we know them. But this seems to be taking this a step further, because when we do no clip, aside from the colour, this new area we fall into is identical to the floor above, even down to the layout. And to exit this red floor, we simply leave the way we came, find a hole in the floor and jump on through. So despite only ever falling down, we always end up right back where we started, creating an infinite loop. And even though we don't get any new entities here, well, aside from this Mega Man hiding in the wall waiting to jump scare us, the way they use these returning entities, the Skin Stealer and the Smilers, is really effective. While earlier on, the Smilers were kept at bay by the lighter areas where we're safe. Here, because of that blood red, dark lighting, the Smilers can move about freely, coming at you in waves, many of them non-stop, all whilst the Skin Stealers are hot on your tail. If the Backrooms is a dangerous, unnatural spin-off of our own world, then this no-clip zone is a dangerous, unnatural spin-off of the Backrooms itself. Corruption on corruption, and you feel it. Not to mention the entrances to the no-clip zones, the way they vibrate like sand jumping on a speaker. You look at it and believe that if you put your foot on this ground, it's going right through. But aside from appearance, these entrances provide an advantage through the traffic light system. You see, we actually have to enter this dangerous floor and open up some doors in order to complete the level, and by each entrance lies a traffic light. Red means an entity is right below you, waiting, whereas green means you're good to go. The entity has left, and is probably slapping up some almond water with his boys. So if you time it just right, your chances of survival increase dramatically. Plus, this finally gives you a reason to slurp up that go-go juice you've been drinking for fun. Up until now, because most of the entities catch you off guard, there's just never really an opportunity to drink the stuff. You're way better off just running than stopping to enjoy a beverage. But seeing as this time we're the ones ambushing the entities, the go-go juice is really helpful in getting a head start. This is exactly the kind of intensity I'm looking for in these late stages. I guess my only critique would be I wish there was an entity or two up above in the regular looking Backrooms, but I understand they probably wanted to balance out the danger levels and establish this part as the safe zone. So yeah, I really loved this level. The bold colours, the otherworldliness, and I'm putting it in S tier. Level 20, Hotel 2, The Chase.
Another one.
Looks like we're back in the hotel. So is the game running out of location ideas? Or have they found a way to upgrade the hotel concept? Well, this level is pretty different from what we're given earlier on. While the first hotel with the sleepy moths was one of the longest levels in the game, our second stay at the hotel will be far shorter and far more intense. which I was a big fan of. This was a real change of pace from all the hiding and sneaking missions that we've been given recently. Despite being the second hotel, this feels much more like a sequel to the run level from earlier, but upgraded in every way. In fact, that blood red lighting makes a return, and having just come from the no-clip zones, a part of me thought, is this going to be as dangerous as down there with the endless entities? Not to mention how much more claustrophobic the hallways are this time around. You can probably stretch your arms out and touch both sides. And not only this, but none of these doors open. Trust me, I tried. So when something inevitably does come rushing down these halls, you already know there'll be nowhere to hide. And after a bit of exploring, I found a switch on the wall, and what do you know, as soon as I flicked it, a siren sounded, and there it was. A mega meatball man running at me full speed. Now, this entity is dangerously close to straying into Goofy, with its jiggly, endless arms and its comically large mouth. But what I like about this creature is that because it is this giant massive arms, it pretty much fills out the entire hallway. There's no possible way of getting around it. It's just this wall of flesh, just adding to that claustrophobia. So, with this meatball man rushing us, let the chase begin. Armed with the chainsaw, you have to dash through this hotel, but unlike in the short 100-meter dash in the previous run level, here, the route isn't spelt out for you. These corridors are winding, there's T-junctions, some of which lead to dead ends, and any slip-up, any wrong turn will definitely end in death. And even when you're not guessing, the environment is doing its best to trick us. But it's not just objects falling out in front of us, it's a bit more psychological. You see, there are several blue areas along the way which act like safe zones, where you can catch your breath and have a little sleepy. So when you re-enter the dangerous halls, having gotten used to seeing blue as safe, the level throws in a couple open blue doors which act as decoys. Try and escape into them and they'll slam in your face, leaving you entirely to the meatball man. This whole section makes the previous run level feel like a demo. This isn't some throwaway segue, it really feels like a scramble. And the music reflects this too. It's the most energetic track in a game which is mostly silent. This is exactly the kind of switch up that this later section of the game needs. Horror doesn't always have to be sneaking and tension, it can be fast paced, and this level really shows that. I'm gonna go S tier. Get in there. Level 21, Engerland. Boy, the creators of the Backrooms must really love vacation, because this game has not one, not two, not 74, but 3 whole hotels. And out of all of the hotel levels, which are some of the better parts of the game, this one might be my favourite. Actually, no, the second one is my favourite, but this is a close second. First off, this hotel fits the style of the Backrooms way more than the first one, which seemed a lot more ornamental and grand when compared to the neutral plain aesthetic of the regular Backrooms. The more details you add to a place, the more clues you're giving as to where this place may be. And so for this game where you're lost, I think usually simpler equals better. And this hotel is as simple as it can get. Just untextured, smooth white walls, and a symmetrical set of plain windows. It's the bare bones of what you could call a building. It genuinely feels like it could be anywhere. If you were dropped into this place, you'd be completely clueless. Is it night or day? Are we in a city, the mountains, deep underground? So we're both lost and trapped at the same time. And it's quite ironic that we have no way of knowing where this hotel is, because it's actually inspired by a real place, the Holiday Inn at London Heathrow Airport. That's right, for the small price of 89 British pounds, you can stay in the Backrooms. And honestly, I was pretty blown away when I found out this was real. And not only that, but it's in my home country. I could go visit this right now, but that would mean going into London, so...
There's never lacking over here.
I'd actually already seen photos of this place, and I genuinely thought it was fake. I think because where you'd expect to see a courtyard open to the beautiful grey London sky, instead it's fully enclosed, completely cut off from the outside world. Probably for airport security reasons, but I still think they should chug a skylight in there or something. And it seems the creators don't just have hotel fever at this stage of the game development, but they were also really in a big monster chasing you down a hotel hallway sorta mood, because the entity of this level is another big monster chasing you down a hotel hallway, this time a giant spider. Similar to the Smiler variant from the beginning, but while that spider was sharp and spindly, this guy's a bit more chunky and furry, almost like a tarantula. And this was interesting to me because this time there's no darkness to hide this guy in, which seems to be this game's go-to with varying levels of success. So I was worried its movement would look unnatural and it wouldn't hold up when close, but I was pleasantly surprised. Despite only having half the legs, they really capture the unnatural movement of a tarantula. But what about the mission of this level? Well, we have to go out into these halls and collect free TVs. You know, the kind of TVs they'd bust out in primary school to watch Ice Age The Meltdown on. So the first two TVs aren't too much of a challenge because they're found in rooms close to the lobby, which acts as a safe zone. The spider can't fit through the door, but we're not gonna judge him, he has feelings too. Actually, technically, these TVs are in the bathrooms of the rooms close to the lobby, so I guess this is just what people did before TikTok, wheel the TV into the poop station to watch their silly little videos. Riz. So the first two TVs, easy peasy. But the third and final TV lies deep in these halls, in the entity's territory, and when wheeling these TVs about, your vision is almost entirely obscured. These bad boys are chunky, so if you want to see down the halls and know if the creature is ahead, you have to stop, wheel the TV to the side for a peek, before carrying on. So you're better off doing it in short bursts. You could try listening for the entity's footsteps, but this is the fastest entity in the game. I think it's the only one that actually runs faster than us, so chances are, by the time you hear this guy, he's already on you. It's a really simple yet effective way of upping the tension on this level. We still get to see this creature very clearly and know what's after us, but how far away it is kept from us when it's most important. It strikes that balance of showing the entity versus letting us imagine really well, and for that and the Backroomsy location, I'm slapping Engerland in A tier, and I promise I'm not biased. Level 22, Poolrooms 2.0.
Too much, man!
Now, we're entering the section of the game where we return to previous locations we've played through, but from a new perspective. And by re-entering old locations, it brings into question just how much progress we're actually making. Are we going in circles, or are we supposed to be going back on ourselves in order to find the correct way out? And because these levels were released with later updates, I was interested to see if they would improve upon their originals. Would it have made more sense to just combine these newer levels with the originals for a more condensed, tight experience? Well, let's find out. So the first familiar level we find ourselves back in is the Poolrooms, one of my favourite locations in the game. But last time we were here, it felt very much like a demo, a preview of what this level has to offer, with the only danger being black sludge you don't want to fall into. But these pools of black sludge were off to the side, and so easy to avoid. I don't even think I mentioned them last time, because they're that little of a threat. It was far from an obstacle course. Like, fine, I guess I won't go slurping up the mystery sludge, but I'm not happy about it. So how does this new take on the Poolrooms compare? Well, the more I've played it, and the more I've thought about it, the more it disappointed me. It seems like for every improvement, there's another drawback. For one, this is the glitchiest level in the game. Your body will just detach from your point of view and it's full on disassociation time. You alright, buddy? You alright, mate? I get it, glitches happen, especially with these kind of games, but this one made it impossible at times to complete the mission, so I had to purposefully get myself killed, which removed a lot of the tension going forward. It's kinda hard to think, oh no, I hope this monster doesn't get me when you're the one running towards him. He's right behind me, isn't he? And I wouldn't mention it if it only happened once, but this happened on every respawn. It was impossible to avoid. But while the glitching can be annoying, it's actually not what brought this level down for me. So the new Poolrooms is sort of one level split up occasionally by 3 mini levels, which we access by leaving the frankly better looking and more fascinating main area to go down some pipes into these, you guessed it, darker underground Poolrooms. And like I was saying earlier, I would have much rather had one great level rather than 3 average ones for the sake of increasing playtime. And it's not like these 3 mini levels contain different challenges like the first hotel. It's just the same task every time but reskinned. And I mean barely reskinned, they have a slightly different layout. And while I was happy, there actually is an entity this time. The problem is that the entity they chose to put in is the multi-arm big mouth dude from the hotel chase. In a tight space like a collection of hallways, this entity works perfectly, but most of the pool rooms is wide open space, so I feel like he didn't suit the environment. Plus he's pretty easy to dodge because he can't go in the water, which there is a lot of in this level. Keep in mind, this is one of the final 3 levels in the game, and yeah, I'd say it's easier than any of the first 3 levels. The game should be escalating up at this point, the most horrifying horrors, the most intense action, the hottest entities. But instead, we get this long, tedious, repetitive level. I mean, why not use these dark pools of water lying all over the place? Have an entity which lurks beneath the surface and crawls out to snatch you and pull you into them, rather than reusing a monster which doesn't work well in this environment. So I feel like this one belongs below the original pool rooms, down in D. They both had potential to be the best levels in the game, but until they get an interesting entity in them, they're down here in the lower tiers. Level 23, Fun Plus.
Fun, fun, fun.
You know the drill, we're back in fun with an exclamation mark, but this time bigger and bolder. And with a plus sign. They can't do that, can they? But while I wasn't the biggest fan of the original pool rooms, so the bar was pretty low for the second installment, Fun with a plus is gonna have a pretty hard time beating the original. Simple as it was effective, and one of my favourite in terms of tone. Now, probably my favourite thing about this new Fun is actually the music. What was played before is creepy and fits the tone of a kid's birthday party being distorted.
It's a party. Come to play. You're missing out on the party.
But here, they take things a bit further. It's a duet between a man and a woman. And while for the most part, it sounds like the kind of sing-along track you'd hear when you're younger, occasionally, the man slips into a rage and starts yelling his lyrics in anger. And I think it fits in really well with this level, something which seems innocent at first glance, but the longer it goes on and the more you're exposed to it, the harder it is for this place to maintain its friendly, nostalgic appearance. And trust me, after an hour on this level, which I'm not proud to admit, this song really gets on your nerves, which I actually liked, because it's just another way of the location getting under your skin. It's intentionally driving you mad. Now, just like Poolrooms 2.0, this level is split up into a collection of smaller challenges, all accessible via a sort of party room hub. And naturally, when you increase the length of a level, you're increasing the chances of it being a mixed bag, simply for the fact that you have to think of more stuff to put in, and the stuff might not always land, and I think that's the case for Fun Plus. It's a bit hit or miss, but I respect them for at least making each challenge challenge and location different. It made entering each new area exciting, as I never knew what I was walking into. The highlight for me personally was this challenge where you have to throw sticks of dynamite at these watchful eyes on the wall. Essentially, the partygoer's version of CCTV, because if you miss and these eyes spot you, then the music stops and the partygoers are sent out to gobble you up. And the only way to get them to back off is to hide under a table. This hiding under a table dynamic could be seen as anticlimactic, and I wouldn't blame you if you thought so, but I do think it fits with the theme of a kid's birthday party, because hiding under a table from danger is a very childish thing to do, and I don't think this would work if this wasn't already the most challenging level in the game, at least for me anyway. Oh, come on, man. Seriously, you have to get the aim and the timings down. Not to mention seeing the eyes in the first place, because they blend in so well with these colourful environments. As for the other 3 challenges, they aren't as memorable in my opinion. I think I could have done with 2 challenges to complete instead of 4, because this is a very long section of the game. It's not like the others are bad, but they do bring the overall average of this level down for me enough to not put it in the top 2 tiers. So it's a solid B, a worthy penultimate level. Now, before we get into the final level, it's time for an honourable mention, with the school.
Wakey, 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 it's time for school.
It looks like the Backrooms are going to high school.
That's good, it's hard to trace, I guess.
Alright! Now, this is more of an interlude into the final level, but I'm going to talk about it because there's a little bit of lore dropped here. When we enter the school, we're told that our guide through these halls will be none other than an entity. Huh? And when we turn the corner, there they are, waving at us to come over. It's a really unnatural moment, and I mean that as a compliment, because this is the first friendly entity we've seen in the entire game. Every single thing, even the environment, has been trying to kill us. So it creates a moment of hesitation. Can this entity be trusted? I mean, why are they wearing a hoodie and a mask and gloves? Why don't they want us seeing any of their skin? Is it human skin? Is this thing even human? But no, this entity actually is here to help. And if this moment where an entity helps us out had been any earlier in the game, I don't think it would have been so impactful. We needed to be starved of anything good to where a faceless, hooded person leading us through a school without saying a word becomes a genuinely sweet moment. Now, during this section, we learn that there's actually been a war going on this whole time between the partygoers, aka the balloon popping boys, and these sad, hooded fellas, like the one guiding us through this level. And while in any other game, this could be seen as a cop-out, an attempt to add significance into this world without actually showing us the war itself. I think that's actually the point. I mean, they could have had us get wrapped up in this conflict between these two species, to the point where we have a direct impact on the outcome. But it's more effective just stumbling upon the aftermath, because this isn't our world, this isn't our war, and to the partygoers and the sad boys, we aren't really important. We're simply a visitor in the Backrooms. So even though the gameplay is more sneaking, it's a segue into the final level. I'm cool with this. B tier. Level 24, Finale.
After 10 years, it's finally concluded.
Here we go, the grand finale, for real this time. So, does this level hold up as a worthy culmination of all things Escape the Backrooms? Kind of. Let's talk about it. Now, this level does something which I feel like I've seen done quite a few times in games, with varying levels of success, which is when a final level takes a bunch of the enemies and a bunch of the locations seen throughout the game, and merges them into one mega level. And sometimes this can work, but if you're not careful, you'll end up being that silly Billy at the function who mixes every flavour of fizzy drink, and instead of being this golden elixir you're dreaming of, it's just this unidentifiable brown sludge. Too many flavours at once can end up being no flavour, and probably the biggest example of this is the map Revelations from Call of Duty Zombies. Probably the best game mode ever created. Now, in Call of Duty Zombies, or Zombies for short, much like Escape the Backrooms, every map has its own identity, its own theme, its own unique monsters, and so for the final DLC of Black Ops 3, Buzz, when the game mode really felt like it was coming to a conclusion, they decided to just mash all of the fan favourite maps into one mega map, without seemingly all that much thought as to whether they'd actually work when combined. You see, the layout of every map is pretty important when it comes to zombies, and very carefully planned out, but then they sort of threw all of this out the window by combining parts of all of them into one, because now they're left trying to stitch together this Frankenstein of a layout, all for the sake of nostalgia. And I can see why they did this, because at this point, zombies had been around for 8 years, and spanned 4 whole games. They'd put the time in to earn and build up that nostalgia. So when you see all of these familiar places and monsters, you go, oh wow, I haven't seen that in years. Man, what a throwback. Keep it real, dog. Radical. Okay, you might not say that last couple stuff, but you get the gist. What I'm getting at here is it's one thing going for a culmination level like this when you have 8 years worth of stuff to draw from, but everything that Escape the Backrooms is bringing back in this final level is stuff we've only seen in this game. Some of these entities and places we've seen less than an hour before, so it feels less like a grand culmination and more like reusing assets from earlier on. But let's talk about how they use these returning entities and locations. When we enter this level, it's a big dark room, only illuminated by light coming from a hole in the floor, and in the middle of this floor is a platform with an elevator, which we can use to traverse up or down, and as you go down, every 10 meters or so lies a backrooms level, and these are where we'll find the familiar entities and locations. So our mission is to grab a camera with a Polaroid attached, and whatever is shown on the Polaroid can be found on one of the floors below. So we have to travel down, find it, and snap a pic. After which, the next item we need to find will be revealed. And I think this is a good format. By separating the items and the level into different floors, they had an opportunity to really scale up the threat with each new floor we step onto. And at first, it looks like things were going this way. The first couple items we have to photograph are fairly normal, or at least harmless. Some graffiti, some stone heads, a creepy white van. Okay, I'm on it. But then the Polaroid shows a photo of the scribble entity, meaning we have to get up close and personal and make it out again before it can grab us. The problem is that despite the danger escalating pretty naturally here, it just doesn't reach very high. It's so much easier than it sounds to get photos of these entities. I mean, look at this. Doesn't exactly scream final level danger. This level felt like it was ramping up to something, some big threat, and then before you know it, it's over. You've escaped the backrooms, and it all feels a little too easy. This level is far from the hardest in the game, which would be fine if it was a cinematic spectacle, but instead it's just more of the other levels, but less interesting, because after we've gone down the first 2 floors, you kinda know what to expect. Even just a shift in the lighting or some interesting sound effects to really ramp up the intensity would go a long way. Maybe make it seem like this place is falling apart and we need to get out now. Or really make use of the insanity meter, have the glitching that happens when it's running low happen a lot more frequently. It's still an okay level, but as a finale, I think some of the others deserved this spot more, especially seeing as the last time we saw a new entity introduced introduced was 3 levels ago. There's no final boss, and I think even just a new entity would have gone a long way. But before I put it on the tier list, let's talk about the final moments, plot-wise. Once we've become a professional photographer, we travel up this elevator to a hallway, and there's actually plants here, flowers, vines, and grass. There's life. And this really helps to transition out of the look of the backrooms, breaking up the overwhelming symmetry we've been staring at for the last couple hours. It really does feel like we're finally safe. At the end of this hallway lies a door, and opening this door, a bright light appears from below. We must take a leap of faith and jump down to once and for all escape the backrooms. But as we do and our eyes adjust, we realise we're falling from the sky, and the last thing we see is a car coming towards us as we lie dying and helpless. And what I love about this ending is that it's not some malicious force that's killed us in the end, it's just bad luck. There are probably multiple exit and entry points to the backrooms, and the one we've chosen just happens to be in the sky. If we'd have taken a different path, then we might have ended up exiting somewhere a lot more safe, or somewhere just as dangerous, like the bottom of the ocean, or the middle of the wilderness, or into the ground itself. It's one final reminder that this place doesn't play by our rules. You can make all the right decisions, sneak past all of the scary entities, but in the end, none of it might matter. It's what I found so fascinating about the backrooms before I even played this game. This place that you've just accidentally stumbled into, you weren't necessarily brought here by some evil entity. There are evil entities here, but it's more like its own ecosystem, like you've taken the wrong path and got lost in the jungle. And so there isn't some grand plan you have to overcome to get out of this place, no destiny waiting for you. It's just survival and hoping for the best. And that's why even though this ending was anticlimactic gameplay wise, plot wise, these final moments really pull through, and so I think the finale deserves to be in B tier, because it just hammered home everything I liked about this game. Despite its flaws, it really is a weird, unique experience. You can tell that they really cared about the backrooms as a concept, with isolation being at the forefront. No cutscenes, no explanations, so few signs of outside life or anyone ever coming to help us, and I think in that way, it really does capture the feel of the backrooms. Now, I'm going to end this video with a confession, so if I end up dead, it's because the FBI got me, and that is because I found the backrooms in real life. And I don't mean at the location where the original photo was taken, I'm pretty sure people have already found that. No, I have found a place which perfectly captured the feeling of the backrooms, but in real life. So a couple of years ago, I went to the great city of Cardiff, Wales, and as tends to happen, after a little bit of sightseeing, my tummy started rumbling. I needed some fine dining to satisfy my hunger. My insanity meter was getting real low, so I opened up my phone and typed in "where food," and the closest result was a restaurant. Maybe restaurant isn't the right word, food establishment. Supposedly less than 100 meters away. In fact, it said that I was standing right next to it, but when I looked around, there was no restaurant to be seen. But then I looked a bit closer, I opened my third eye, and there it was. You see, the reason I hadn't seen this place is because the entrance is pretty much a hole in the wall, which immediately drops down a flight of stairs to a basement. The whole place is underground, which is kind of strange for a restaurant because, you know, you want good ventilation and maybe some sunlight. But maybe this place is going for the casino aesthetic. In fact, I'm pretty sure from looking at the entrance that this might once have been a casino. And just like the backrooms, casinos are designed to keep out the outside world, so that when the sun comes up, you don't have that, "Oh, what am I doing, man?" thought. So we haven't even stepped in yet, and my backrooms meter is already at a 4. Now, this hole in the wall, it called me in. I can imagine in the same way that cave explorers feel a temptation to submerge themselves into the earth and explore the unknown. Once you reach the bottom of the steps, the first thing you're hit with is a huge breakfast bar taking up a whole room. A room that is the size of some restaurants. But this food doesn't look real. It's all pre-plated up stuff from the cold menu. But we're not talking sandwiches. It was more giant pork pies and huge salads. The kind of thing which you have to think they can't be selling out of this. It felt like a movie set and this was prop food. But what was weirder was the prices. Rounding up or down does not exist in this place. Things would be £6.87 or £5.52. I mean, look at this review. £1.71 for a teapot? Who's doing these prices? And I think this was done to throw you off so much that you stop thinking about whether or not it's expensive or whether you should go somewhere else, and instead you're too busy trying to round it up. Now, unfortunately, they were all out of moth jelly, so I went for a simple chicken burger instead. Pretty standard meal, and I go sit down and wait for my food to arrive. And this is when we get to the main hall. Looking around, all you see is pillars and the same mustard yellow we're all too familiar with by now. But if this already didn't look enough like the Backrooms, the most unsettling part is a number of big arched doorways leading to nothing. Or what looked like nothing. You see, this place hosts big events occasionally, but when they're not, they shut off these big open rooms and turn the lights off, meaning you're just staring into the shadows, wondering where does that go? But I've ordered my food now, it's too late to back out, and the way this restaurant is laid out, it's a one-way system. The entrance is not the same as the exit, and I wasn't mentally prepared enough with the amount of insanity I had to venture out and try and find this exit. Now, I'm a mayo boy. I need my mayo. Mayo is probably the only thing that can anchor me back to reality right now. But when I asked my kind waiter for a little dash of mayo, he told me it's round the corner. Now, this shook me to my core. This place is pretty big, and like I said, there are mystery doorways all over the place. How do I know I'm not going to get lost on my way to the mayo station and slip into one of these voids? But I do really like mayo, so I thought it was worth the risk. Little did I know that the biggest scare was yet to come. As I turned the corner, there was no mayo to be seen. I thought, wow, this kind waiter has duped me. He sent me on a wild goose chase. How do I know he's not a skin stealer? But then I spotted it. A table filled with various condiments. And one of these condiments was the mayo. But not in a bottle or a sachet or hell, even a jar. Instead, a metal gravy boat filled to the brim with mayo. I don't know what it was about this site, but it just did not feel right. Look, like any place, I don't know what kind of people frequent this establishment deep underground. I don't know if there's a mole man hiding in the void who's been double dipping this communal mayo bowl. I mean, how long has it been out? I mean, gravy is one thing because you pour it out. It kind of has to be in a gravy boat. I mean, it's in the name. But having to spoon gelatinous mayo out of a metal gravy boat was just the cherry on top of this strange experience. And that's what I'm getting at here. Everything about this dining experience was just slightly strange. Actually, it was very strange. The being cut off from the outside world, the vast sea of empty tables, the mysterious void rooms everywhere you look, that mustard shade of yellow, actually that's pretty common in the UK. Just like the Backrooms, each thing on its own wouldn't necessarily be unsettling, but when you combine them, you get an absolute nightmare, and I needed to get out. So like I did when I was having a problem on Escape the Backrooms, I thought, why not consult the wiki? Now, unfortunately, this restaurant doesn't have a wiki, but it does have some reviews on Google, so maybe there's some clues lying in one of these as to how to escape. Okay, this person gave them 2 stars. Third time coming to Pillars in 3 months. Each time they have overcharged me. I think each person you ask gives you different prices. Well, yeah, I don't really blame them. It's hard enough trying to remember 10 different menu items and prices when they're normally priced. Now, imagine if everything was £3.57 or £7.89. That must be a nightmare. Now, not to victim blame, but if you came back twice after being overcharged, that's kinda on you. Hey, this is Editing Me here. So I have tried for so long, but I just cannot find this review. I know it was there because I read it with my own two eyeballs, but maybe they've taken it down or the higher ups got to them. But while I was trying to find this review, I typed in the exact same words to see if anything would come up. And when I told Google, third time at this restaurant in 3 months, it provided me with what I believe is a mental health helpline. So, but I promise, the review was there. You know what? These reviews clearly aren't gonna help. I needed to take matters into my own hands. So I waited till the server was looking the other way before running over to the communal mayo table and flipping it over. Naturally, this caused quite the commotion, and I was able to sneak into the kitchen and find the fridge. Just what I thought. This puppy was stacked up, filled to the brim with almond water. But more importantly, go-go juice. In this version of the Backrooms, I guess they call it Monster Energy. So I cracked a couple open, stashed some moth jelly on my way out, and made a break for it. And the chef skin stealer, hot on my tail, kept yelling, "Oi, that fat little bloke just stole all of our monsters." But his trickery didn't work on the other diners. They were too busy gorging on moth jelly and pork pies, and fighting over what was left of the communal mayo. I scrambled to find the exit, and like a miracle, there it was, a set of stairs. And as I climbed, memories of my time in the Backrooms flashed before me. Everyone we met along the way, the mysterious, the scary, the sexy, and with each step, I found myself leaving them all behind. And finally, after what felt like months or years, sunlight hit my face. I just never thought I'd see the day that I escape the Backrooms. Get it? Because that's the name of the game.